Hello and welcome to this series of workshops on social emotional learning. My name is Greg Sherman and I am a faculty member and researcher at Radford University in the area of instructional technology. And although it may sound like instructional technology is a field that could help you with some of your computer issues, I really can't help you get your printer hooked up. It's a field that focuses on learning and what people can do to help facilitate learning. And that's exactly what these workshops are all about. And I'm really excited actually to be part of this project because one of the most important things that I think teachers and educators in general need to do in their jobs to help make things better and to help improve things is to help make better decisions about what really is important for people to learn how to do in their lives. And that really is at the heart of what this series of workshops is all about. Now, this session provides a number of resources that you can access and use throughout all of these information sessions. And it would be a good idea to have a copy of those resources in front of you as you move through these sessions, because they're going to be referenced regularly throughout. Now, I'm going to start these series of informational sessions off with a story that reflects the value and the power of social emotional learning. And that is a story about a principal in a middle school here in the United States. And it made the national news recently, but I'm telling you, it's actually a very good, positive story. I know you probably hear principal and national news and you're preparing for disaster, but this is actually a good story. It's the story of a principal named Jason Smith who had a student sent to his office for disciplinary reasons because the student wouldn't take his hat off and refused to even discuss it with the teacher. So it was a rule at the school, no hats, and so this was a problem. On the surface, perhaps the student might have been identified as being belligerent or maybe something worse. But the student was sent to the office, and what Principal Smith realized after just talking to the student was that he had had a haircut recently that he was really unhappy with, embarrassed about, and he didn't want to take his hat off. That was more important to him than any kind of confrontation that he was going to have with any educator that day. And because the principal took the time to ask questions about why the behavior was there and what was behind it, he was able to figure out that that solving the problem could actually be pretty simple. He happened to have a lot of experience cutting hair, and so I think there must have been some negotiating going on, but the student agreed to let the principal fix his hair, and the principal did, and that diffused the situation. And that story really speaks to the value of how learners are feeling emotionally and what impact that has on their behavior in the classroom and on their ability to learn anything else. And if you really think about it, you're probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with our most basic needs forming the foundation of the hierarchy, and nothing else can be addressed until basic needs are met. And you'll have to admit that in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for young teenagers, that hair and shoes is probably right at about the same level as oxygen and general safety. So that was a situation where that was acknowledged by the principal, and it was such an interesting story that it made the national news. Now, of course, the value of addressing how the emotional needs of students and how students interact with each other as a result of how they might be feeling on the inside has translated into some very negative stories across our country in schools. No worse probably than the bullying problems that exist in schools. Now, of course, bullying can be a tremendous problem, and it is an extreme issue and one that's really important to deal with because there are such important ramifications to bullying. Now, this workshop series isn't about anti-bullying or ways that administrators can be more responsive to the needs of kids. It is about recognizing the importance of the emotional or affective elements of being human and responding to the tremendous need and importance for helping students learn how to manage their emotional responses and interact with others in positive ways. So this series of 5 workshops will take you on a journey designed to help you reach a goal for yourself of being able to identify and implement strategies to support the learning of social emotional learning skills within the schools that you work with. So the first session, the one that you're experiencing right now, provides an overview of social emotional learning, and it also presents some tools and resources that can help you along your own personal journey to address social emotional learning in your own schools. So session 2 addresses getting started with supporting social emotional learning. Session 3 specifically addresses student support and discipline issues. Session 4 addresses cultural competency. And finally, session 5 will address embedding and reinforcing social emotional learning in building successful implementation models in your schools and perhaps across the state of Virginia. So we're going to officially kick off session 1 here by presenting a brief introduction by Anthony Swan. He is the 2021 Teacher of the Year here in Virginia, and he's going to be helping set the stage for the relevance and importance of helping schools embrace the teaching of social emotional learning skills.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Swan. I am the Region 6 Virginia Teacher of the Year, as well as the 2021 Virginia Teacher of the Year. I just want to welcome all of you administrators to this webinar. First of all, I want to tell you thank you for everything that you're doing for us as far as us as teachers is concerned. Your work does not go unnoticed, and I really want to tell you thank you for the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being on the front lines during this COVID-19 pandemic. It does not go unnoticed from a teacher's perspective. I wanted to speak to you about the importance of the social and emotional learning within public schools. It is very important that our students have this in the public school setting. For instance, when my district went back to school 4 days a week, the very first day we had all of our students in class. I had a student to walk in class, and his very first words were, "Oh my God, I get to see my friends." So as a teacher, from that perspective, I began to observe and begin to just think about, you know, we as adults, we've been channeling through this pandemic the best we can, but I can't imagine what children have to go through, you know, especially, you know, having their social life stripped from them, and the things that they may be dealing with mentally because of the emotions that have come with this pandemic. And so having social emotional learning within public schools is very important. We want to be able to support those students, and we want to be able to let them know that we know that you are dealing with this issue. And so having that support in this particular area is very important. So as administrators, I want to thank you in advance for supporting this within our public schools within the Commonwealth of Virginia. Once again, thank you.
So as mentioned previously, one of the main purposes of this first session is to help you begin to investigate some of the tools and resources that are available as you learn more about social emotional learning. The 3 principal objectives for this session include identifying some of the fundamental skills, knowledge, and attitudes that define social emotional learning, explaining why social emotional learning is important, and finally identifying some of the really important sources of support as you begin to learn more about social emotional learning. Now, the very first support resource that is addressed in this presentation is a resource that is related to these information sessions in the first place, and that is the Virginia Department of Education's Office of Student Services Learning and Resource Center. The Department of Education's Office of Student Services partnered with the Center for Implementation and Evaluation of Education Systems at Old Dominion University to develop a professional development and resource collection for school leaders and specialized instructional support personnel. The efforts of the Office of Student Services address many important educational needs, including improving instruction through effective reforms and best practices, promotion of wellness, equipping children with knowledge and skills to make wise choices, selecting and employing technology to improve teaching and learning, maintaining safe learning environments, and educating children in non-traditional settings. So this is the first support resource presented in the resource guide, and one that you should familiarize yourself with on your journey toward accomplishing your social-emotional learning goals. So one of the things I value the most about social-emotional learning is that it is becoming something that more and more educators are recognizing is important. And this is one of the important times, at least in the history of my experience as an educator, where we're having a national and maybe even an international movement, or at least look at addressing what's really worth teaching and learning in schools. And in my estimation, helping to facilitate positive and meaningful social emotional learning skills is one of the most important things that any of us can do as educators at any level of education. Some of the specific skills that social emotional learning promotes are helping educators and students develop positive self-identities, modeling how best to manage emotions, supporting teachers and students in setting goals and helping them accomplish their goals, feeling and showing empathy for others and encouraging those in their life to do the same, establishing and maintaining healthy relationships, handling difficult situations effectively, and making responsible and caring decisions. Now, school leaders can use the skills, knowledge, and attitudes that define social emotional learning and use the teaching of those skills and the value of having kids learn those skills as the foundation of creating a very positive school climate. Now, the second support resource that we're introducing here is really one of the most important. It's the organization known as the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, CASEL. And as the name implies, it addresses how educators can help facilitate and support social emotional learning within an academic environment. Now, this support website provides an excellent interactive overview or framework for social emotional learning that addresses the 5 broad competency areas. These areas include self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea about what each of those 5 core areas looks like, let's take a closer look at self-awareness as one of the social emotional learning core competency areas. If you examine support resource 2B, this is a support for the big CASEL website, resource number 2. This provides access to a PBS media video, very short, that provides a little bit of storytelling about self-awareness and what that addresses within the framework of social emotional learning. Now, support website number 3 actually complements the previous 2 support sites, and this is not really a website that is a support, but it's a podcast presented on a website. And this amazing podcast by Wendy Turner provides an excellent overview of how CASEL defines social emotional learning and details strategies to address the 5 core competencies of social emotional learning. Now, if you're not in the habit of including podcasts as part of your continued professional learning, you really should get into it, because there are a lot of excellent education-related podcasts out there, and you can enjoy and appreciate them while you're driving, while you're washing the dog, while you're trying to avoid and close yourself off from the outside world. So you should check out that podcast. I think it's very good. Now, the next two resources are also related to each other. And the first one provides a very simple, very basic overview of some of the strategies that you, as an educational leader, might want to employ in order to begin thinking about how you might address social emotional learning in your own practice, in the practice of your teachers, and also how it will be realized in the classroom. The first article deals with 6 tips for keeping the social in social emotional learning, and this provides an overview of the PATHS program. Now, the second support website, number 5, which is related to number 4, is the actual PATHS website. And it provides specific resources to help administrators and teachers successfully implement social emotional learning instruction into their classrooms. Now, the next support website is also not really a website, but it is a short video presented by Dr. Daniel Siegel, who is a psychiatric physician specializing in pediatric and adolescent psychology. He's the author of the book Mindsight, The New Science of Personal Transformation. And in the brief video, Dr. Siegel provides a simple model for understanding some of the basic functions of the human brain and what we can do to help promote healthier responses to stressful situations. And so modeling self-care and treating yourself to self-care is probably the first step in any kind of sort of trying to plan and arrange how you might address the importance of social emotional learning in your schools. Now, going back to one of the first stories that was used to introduce this series, there's often trauma that underlies the negative behavior of people in our lives, of colleagues, of family members, and of students and teachers. And certainly in the story about the young student who refused to take off his hat because he had gotten a bad haircut, that may not be the kind of trauma that you think about when you see the word trauma, though I will say as someone who survived being an adolescent in school, I can tell you that a bad haircut, it can be pretty important at the time. But understanding trauma and understanding how to address trauma in students is also something that teachers and administrators now are beginning to learn more about and beginning to explore positive and healthy ways of addressing that. And resources number 7 and 8 are provided to help you learn more about how you might address trauma and where trauma might fit into the whole framework of social emotional learning. Support number 7 represents a short video produced by Kaiser Permanente's Center for Total Health. This is a basic overview of the importance of addressing the trauma that some students have experienced in their lives. And resource number 8 is an excellent article posted on eSchool News that presents 5 ways to address trauma in the classroom. Now, the last resource that we're introducing in this overview session is a resource that can be very, very important and very valuable for educators in Virginia. And this is the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support. The VTSS aligns academic behavior and social emotional wellness into a single decision-making framework to establish the supports needed for schools to be effective learning environments for all students. You'll see on this website that there are many, many resources that can be very useful for school leaders as well as teachers. So that concludes our overview of the support resources that will be very useful for you as school leaders and educators as you begin to learn more and explore more about addressing social emotional learning. And so hopefully what you've been able to get out of this information session includes identifying fundamental skills that define social emotional learning, explaining why social emotional learning is important, and identifying sources of support for effectively supporting social emotional learning in the classroom. So that brings us to the end of this information session. And if you want to continue on in this journey, the next step is about getting started with social emotional learning support. So again, Make sure that you have those resources handy as you move through these 5 sessions, and more resources will be added as you go through. But what you've been given in this workshop has been a very, very good start for understanding more and learning more about social emotional learning. So hope to see you again in session 2.